Rams scrimmage, and more precisely, the Cowboys' decision to continue their conditioning after Rams scrimmage. Set the table for us. You kind of explain what happened.
Yeah, so I mean, practice occurs as it does. They beat each other up for the better part of an hour, essentially. And most of the time when scrimmages end, the whistle goes off, everyone goes their separate ways. Maybe some guys high-five each other or whatever afterward. Hey, we'll see you during the season, X, Y, and Z. It's usually pretty cordial with some trash talk afterward, right? Instead, Zeke, if you can play the VO here, the Cowboys just kind of up and decided, hey, man, we're going to keep on conditioning. We're going to do our own running drill afterward. This is what they do at the tail end of every practice. My first thought was, this reminded me a little bit of the movie Miracle, where Herb Brooks has him after a bad game, essentially, to keep going. So my first thought when I saw this was, oh, Schottenheimer didn't like what they were doing.
Yeah, they got in trouble.
There's something along those lines. I guess at that point, it's not quite so much posturing as it is trying to fulfill what the coach has kind of set before them as a challenge on that front. And I understand it. Like, Dak continued to soundbite a little bit later saying, conditioning is just another edge that we could have once the regular season comes around, where it's not something even toward the tail end of the game, but the better conditioned team looks better earlier on in the game. So there's some merit to it, but it also did feel a little performative. Like, there's always that kind of double-edged sword on, do they believe in this? Is this who they are? Versus, are they just doing this to show, like, we believe in the culture a certain way, right? Like, how much value are they actually getting from doing that after a practice like this?
I mean, I thought it was interesting hearing the Rams players seeing the Rams players as they were walking off the field. They're like,
just snickering.
Yeah. I ain't running.
Nerds.
That's
what
nerds.
Like,
Yeah,
nerds. Tryhards. Like, sometimes, like, that culture still exists in sports, unfortunately.
I would put more validity in that if they hadn't been doing this every day up until this point. If they had, this is the first time they'd done it, then absolutely clown them all as much as you want to.
Yeah.
But, I mean,
this is a continuation.
Newsflash, that's what good teams do. I mean, so if you're going to sit here and, dog on them because they wanted to get extra work in, okay, that's fine.
Yeah. No
I
problem.
think the fact that it came from Dak and Demo also leads me to believe
that also
it wasn't.
She's only saying that because Demo's involved, but anyway.
I'm actually not that big of a homer. I mean, I think he's great.
Right.
But
No, I'm just giving you stuff. Go for it.
I do think, based on like the character of those two individuals, or at least from a on the field standpoint and a locker room standpoint, character-wise, they would be the ones, right, to be like, coach isn't mandating this, and I believe that. Like, it does make sense that the coaching staff, who, again, for a little bit of context here, if you haven't been following along up to this point, at the beginning of the year, before the very first practice, Brian Schottenheimer told us, the media, hey, look, you're going to see the guys doing conditioning drills at the end of practice. It's something that we had decided on beforehand because we want to be the best conditioned team. It's not punishment for them. Because in years past, we had seen them do some of these like pacer test-esque drills, and you're like, oh, they were only doing that because they got in trouble, or they didn't have a good practice, or they were messing around. Like, it was a result of some sort of misbehavior, essentially. This year, they've done these conditioning drills after every practice, but they weren't going to do it after the scrimmage because they were at the Rams facility, and it just isn't necessarily like normal to do that. But because it was both Demo and Dak being like, hey, from an offensive and a defensive leadership standpoint, we think that we should do this because it's in line with, right, like the culture we're trying to build, the team we're trying to build this year. The fact that it was even just a thing, like that was one of the big storylines coming out of the scrimmage.
But part of the reason why it was a thing was because we weren't allowed to physically shoot 11-on-11 drills. So the video that we're getting is kind of sparsely populated with what's been allowed by Cowboys social media and Rams social media to that degree. But that was a decision since they were on the Rams facility. They were more restrictive on what they could and could not shoot, photographers specifically. We have tons of B-roll pre-practice, pre-11-on-11, and the rest of it is kind of notes and snippets here or there. So what you're going to be seeing here as we're showing you VO through this segment is a lot of vertical videos that the Cowboys themselves shot. We would love to give you more in-depth analysis on that front, but that's just the reality of what the Rams are doing. Seriously, but some teams view it as an edge. As much as the Cowboys are looking for that edge, the Rams are looking for that same edge too, even though they're doing what the Cowboys were last year, which is keep everything vanilla. You know what I mean? Like, we're not going to show our hand at all, even in these ramp-up sessions, right? So there's always limited not limited viewership, but limited things you can take away from each of these training camp practices. It's all about just muscling up and see how you physically compare against other teams.
Well, and I feel like that is an interesting point you bring up, because this training camp, more than ones I can remember, at least in the last couple of years, there's been this discourse online about like what the media members are able to shoot and share versus what's been shared previously. Like, the whole premise here is that Jerry, and this will actually get into what we talk about in a little bit with the valuation of the team, like, Jerry has always been a marketing-centric, business-first owner of this franchise, right? There's a reason why the Cowboys are year in and year out the most valuable franchise in sports, and it's not just because the team wins a lot, because it hasn't in a while, but it's because of the reach it has. And if you go back and you watch some of the conversations that Jerry was involved in earlier on in his tenure owning this team, like, he was heavily involved with the media rights and getting Fox being built into the NFL enterprise that it is. So he understands the value of eyeballs on his product, and that is why forever we've always been able to share so much of what goes on at training camp, where other teams don't allow media members to share all that. If you think about the fact, like, this was actually a story he told during this training camp, and I know I am kind of going on a different
No, go for it. We're good.
He was talking about when he either had early on bought the team or whatever, they were practicing against the Raiders. And he said there were fences so high built around the practice facility by Ray Davis that not a cricket could watch practice. And that was the way that things were done. Like, teams wanted to be insular about what they shared so that other teams that they would compete against during the regular season didn't have any sort of advantage.
Right.
Well, Jerry went the other end of the spectrum and was like, any person who wants to can come watch us at our open practices during training camp. And that in 2026 means that all of those fans who come to practice can use their iPhones and post whatever they want, right? So if the fans are posting practice footage, it's getting out there regardless.
Right.
And that is why the media is allowed to post practice footage, because it's open practice. Now, there are portions of practice that are closed to the media and public.
Of course.
Where they do different things. But it was interesting because this offseason, Christian Parker talked about the fact that when he was with the Eagles in the past, he would watch some of these clips that got posted to the internet.
It's hysterical because the Cowboys themselves performed better in a Super Bowl because of Bill's practice that was caught on TV during, I think it was the second Super Bowl era where they were trying a shovel pass or something on those lines. And it's like, it's always a minor thing, but you never know when it comes back to bite you.
Yes.
And that's the push and pull of this. That's why we keep talking about the battle between the brand of the Cowboys and the team in and of itself. So as long as those two things remain at odds, you're always going to have some kind of friction either at this point in the season or in a crucial point later on in the season. It will happen at some point.
Which means that as long as Jerry's at the helm, it's going to stay that way.
Well, okay. So Jerry should have at least some more reason for optimism on the defensive front. Yes. That was the other main takeaway from the
and
itself.
Some of those clips that we're going to try to show you include one Justin Barron, undrafted free agent out of Syracuse. He's getting ready for his second season here in Dallas. It's VO3. I think this has
Yep, this will start with Christian Parker. Just again, we're transitioning here. This is a shot from pre-scrimmage right into Justin Barron with a pair of picks. One off of Stetson Bennett here, and then another one from Stafford. He had three.
Yeah, so he had three on the day, two off of Stetson Bennett. I think, to your point, we only have footage of two of the three.
Exactly.
But yeah, he had the hat trick yesterday.
That was Stafford.
And yeah, that was off of Matthew Stafford, reigning MVP. But look, do I expect Justin Barron to be a starting linebacker for the Cowboys this year? Absolutely. No, I'm not going to say absolutely not, but like, no. He's, in their first unofficial depth chart that was released, he's not a starting linebacker. But you look at a guy like this, and I think what this shows me is that they are playing as a team defense.
Yeah.
Because that's not just a Justin Barron interception. That's we're understanding what we're seeing. We're communicating pre-snap. We're getting guys in the right position, which is night and day better than it was last year.
And communication at a minimum, yes.
Yes. So to me, those are more like team interceptions. Yes, obviously he had to. But you see right there, like, I don't know who that was, one of their tight ends for the Rams, but he had 3 white jerseys around him. Like, that's the type of thing you want to see from...
Which is night and day from what you were talking about last year. Because you were covering games where there were receivers open by 15
by
yards.
COVID distances.
Immediately off the line too, like to the point where they
Yes.
had no idea they were
Yes.
physically there. Yeah,
They're going against one of the best offenses in the league every day, and they certainly are. But that offense didn't necessarily get off to firing on all cylinders at the start of that scrimmage yesterday. Dak Prescott, we talked about this a little bit in the midday show, but Dak Prescott finishing with an interception on the day, Joe Milton being intercepted. Tyler Guyton had a bit of an elbow issue that he was dealing with early on that forced him to come off for a little bit. And I mean, you talked about Terrence Steele not necessarily having his best showing either. So I say all of that, also saying they finished with several red zone touchdowns.
Yep.
They did get things going after a little while, but I think one of the biggest storylines going into this season, right, is not only George Pickens playing on the franchise tag, but what kind of George Pickens are they going to get?
Exactly.
And for as much as he's been lauded about the step that he took in terms of maturity, both on and off the field during his first season in Dallas, I think some of those things that we saw from him in Pittsburgh, some of the reasons why he got the narrative that he did leaving Pittsburgh, we saw speckles of throughout last season. We saw a little bit of those speckles yesterday.
Just a touch. I mean, again, and you want an edge early in practice, right? You want someone that brings the energy and the grit. That's fine at this time of the year, right? Like, again, this is the first time you get to be hyper competitive against somebody that's not in your own jersey. You've already been trash talked by your defense, which you think you're better than anyway. And then going up against a Rams defense that admittedly is limited, but you know, you feel like you're better than. You want to try and prove a point and kick a pylon after a touchdown. That's up to you, but that's also kind of one of the questions, as Michelle said, on the maturity level of the player. I was going to say immaturity, but I don't think that's necessarily fair in this case. Just because, again, we don't know what was being said during practice. We don't know how much he was taunted. There are tons of variables that are part of this entire equation. We like the energy. Focus it on the field.
It's okay to be yourself, but you know, when the bullets start flying, let's not get a little crazy with all the antics and stuff like that on the field.
He has done these like celebrations at the end of basically not every catch, but a lot of catches.
Yeah.
Starting with practice number 1 at training camp, you know, and I think there's always two sides to the coin, right? Like there's always two different ways in which you can look at the same situation. I think the positive way to look at this is George Pickens came into this season with a lot of question marks surrounding him, his situation. He does have pressure on his shoulders, not only to follow up the career year that he had last year, but also to have a season in which gets him paid, whether that be by the Cowboys or another team in the NFL next season. That's to be determined. But, like, he has pressure on his shoulders to have a good season. The fact that he has come in and from day one of practice, when they started even without pads on, and they started 11-on-11 drills, he has been doing these celebrations, like whether it's a slant pass that he's catching and running to the end zone
just
with,
even the other day when he chucked the ball into the outside the training camp facility practically. Like, no, that's the thing. He is a demonstrative person.
Yes.
You want that energy.
Yes.
You just want it in a positive sense.
Well, and my thing is like at a certain point, those specific celebrations, the chunking of the football, you can't be doing that during a game.
Right.
So like, and so that's where I'm like, there's two sides to this coin. I think what you're seeing out of him is joy. Like, he's happy to be there.
He's excited. He's activated. Like, he's engaged with what's going on. Absolutely.
He's probably his best self when he is doing these things.
Right.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. And that's a huge plus, not just for him, but for the team. But I think where you look at the minus is like, well, at what point do we start to kind of bring that in? And I'm sure it will change once we progress, get closer to the season starting, get into the actual regular season.
Yep.
But at the same time,
it's just such a tight rope to walk.
Yeah.
You know
but
what I mean?
but that's been the bugaboo of his career, is he's still on the tightrope.
Yeah.
And it's that dangerous one way or the other, right? And we saw it, as Michelle said, like, we saw snippets of it. There was nothing really egregious last season by any stretch of the imagination. There was just maybe a couple blips on the radar where he lost focus for some reason or got his head out of the game. Those can happen to anybody. And I think the reality is, like, the more you see this in practice and the more you see him be around people that will allow him to stay focused. Which is why I say leadership on the Cowboys is so important, whether it is Dak, Schottenheimer, CeeDee Lamb, who he's buddies with. And I'll throw Christian Parker in there, too, just as someone that can, battle him on a mental level. I think that all of those are important keys and characteristics to have on a football team that is trying to keep him in his best self.